50,000 units. That is the number that defines American armor in World War II. The M4 Sherman was the spine of the Allied war effort. It is the tank you see in every movie, every newsreel, and every town square memorial. But the Sherman casts a long shadow. And hidden in that shadow is a story of desperation, ingenuity, and lethal evolution. Because the war wasn't won by a single tank design, it was won by the ugly ducklings that held the line in 1942. It was won by the speed demons that raced across France in 1944. And it was won by the heavyweights that finally tamed the German tigers at the gates of Berlin. Today, we are stripping away the Cold War. We are looking strictly at the years 1941 to 1945. We are ranking the top 5 American World War II tanks that weren't the Sherman. We'll be judging them on strategic necessity, battlefield innovation, and their ability to kill the enemy, from the beaches of the Pacific to the streets of Cologne. Let's open the hatch. At number 5, we have a machine that technically shouldn't be a tank at all. But without it, the Pacific War would have halted at the water's edge. This is the LVTA, the amphibious tank, or as the Marines called it, the AM tank. Here is the strategic reality of 1943. The U.S. Navy and Marines are staring at the coral atolls of the Pacific. Tarawa, Saipan, Peleliu. These islands are surrounded by sharp coral reefs. A standard Higgins boat would get stuck hundreds of yards from the beach, forcing Marines to wade through chest-deep water into machine gun fire. They needed a tank that could swim. The solution was to take the LVT Alligator cargo carrier and slap a tank turret on top. The LVTA-1 used the turret from a Stuart light tank. The later LVTA-4 used a 75mm howitzer in an open turret. These weren't just transport vehicles, they were assault armor. They could climb over the coral reefs, drive up onto the beach, and immediately blast Japanese bunkers at point-blank range. Look at the Battle of Saipan, June 1944. As the first wave of Marines hit the beach, they were pinned down by intense mortar fire. It was the AM tanks that pushed inland first, functioning as mobile artillery. They had paper-thin armor, literally boilerplate, that could be penetrated by heavy machine guns. But their impact was undeniable. As one Marine put it, when those ugly iron tubs crawled out of the surf, they looked like chariots from hell. They didn't conquer Europe, but they unlocked the door to Japan. Number 4 is the tank everyone loves to hate. It was tall, it was ugly, and it was obsolete the day it was built. This is the M3 Lee, or the Grant, in British service. But before you laugh at it, you need to understand the crisis of 1941. When the Nazis swept across Europe, America realized its tanks were toys. We needed a tank with a 75mm gun to kill panzers, but U.S. industry didn't know how to build a turret big enough to hold one yet. So, the engineers made a compromise. They shoved the big gun into the side of the hull and put a smaller gun on top. The result was a nightmare for the crew. You couldn't hull down. To fire the main gun, you had to expose 2/3 of the tank. The Soviets, who received them via Lend-Lease, called it the coffin for 7 brothers. But, in 1942, it was the only thing that worked. Let's go to the Battle of Gazala in North Africa. The British 8th Army is reeling. German Rommel is pushing hard. Then, the M3 Grants arrive. For the first time, the British had a tank that could outrange the German Panzer III and IV. German commanders were shocked when their tanks started exploding from 1,000 yards away. Field Marshal Rommel himself noted the unpleasant surprise of this new American pilot tank. The M3 bought the Allies time. It held the line at El Alamein until the Sherman could arrive. It was an ugly stopgap, but it saved the war in North Africa. At number 3, we have the hot rod, the M18 Hellcat. Now, the purists in the comments are already typing, "That's not a tank, that's a tank destroyer." And you are right. But to tell the story of American World War II armor, we must talk about the M18 because it represents a specific fatal American philosophy, the tank destroyer doctrine. The U.S. Army believed that standard tanks, like the Sherman, shouldn't fight other tanks. That job was for the tank destroyers, lightly armored, high-speed snipers, and the M18 was the ultimate expression of this speed. It remains the fastest-tracked armored vehicle the U.S. has ever fielded, capable of hitting 55, even 60 miles per hour on paved roads. It had less armor than a modernized forklift. The crew was in an open-topped turret, exposed to snipers and shrapnel, but it had a high-velocity 76mm gun and the speed to flank anything. September 1944. The Battle of Aricourt. In the fog of Lorraine, France, a force of M18 Hellcats ran into a counterattack by the German 5th Panzer Army, including Panthers. This should have been a slaughter, but the Hellcats used the fog and their speed. They raced around the flanks of the German heavy tanks, putting shots into their thinner side armor and disappearing before the German turrets could rotate. The 704th Tank Destroyer Battalion claimed a kill ratio that sounds fake, but is verified. Dozens of German tanks destroyed for the loss of a handful of Hellcats. The doctrine was wrong. Tanks did need to fight tanks, but the Hellcat was so good it almost made the bad ideas work. Number 2 is the unsung hero, the global workhorse, the M3 and M5 Stuart. While the heavy tanks get the glory, the light tank battalions did the dirty work. From 1941 to 1945, if there was a U.S. Army unit moving, a Stuart was probably scouting the road ahead. Armed with a 37mm Squirrel rifle, it couldn't penetrate a German tank from the front after 1942. But it was fast, and mechanically, it was a masterpiece. When the British first received them in Africa, they were used to tanks that broke down every 50 miles. The Stuart just kept running. They nicknamed it the Honey because she was sweet to drive. In Europe, they served as recon, often dying to find the enemy so the Shermans knew where to shoot. But in the Pacific, the Stuart was the main battle tank. The Japanese tanks, like the Heigo, were light and riveted. The Stuart could chew them up. In the Philippines and Burma, the Stuart was the apex predator, blasting pillboxes and running down infantry. It wasn't powerful, it wasn't scary, but it was everywhere. It proves that in a global war, reliability is a quality all its own. But finally, we arrive at number 1, the tank that American crews dreamed of for 3 years, the M26 Pershing. By 1944, the Sherman was struggling. The German Tiger and Panther could kill a Sherman from 2,000 yards. The U.S. needed a heavyweight champion. Development was delayed by bureaucracy and the foolish belief that we didn't need a heavy tank. But after the Battle of the Bulge, the rush was on. The M26 arrived in the final weeks of the war. It brought a massive 90mm anti-aircraft gun adapted for tank warfare and 4 inches of frontal armor. We actually have this tank's lethality on film. March 6, 1945. Cologne, Germany. A German Panther tank knocks out a Sherman. An M26 Pershing from the 3rd Armored Division moves to engage. In perhaps the most famous tank footage of history, we see the Pershing fire on the move. 3 rounds, 3 hits. The Panther burns. For American tankers, The Pershing was vindication. It was proof that American industry could build a machine that didn't just win by numbers, it won by being better. It arrived too late to change the war's outcome, but it changed the future. The Pershing retired the light-medium-heavy classification and became the grandfather of the modern main battle tank. It is the bridge between the chaotic improvisation of World War II and the dominance of the Cold War. The Sherman won the war of logistics. It was the Ford Model T of death. But these 5 machines tell the real story of the war. They tell a story of adapting to the quarrel of the Pacific, the panic of North Africa, and the armor of the Rhineland. They proved that the arsenal of democracy wasn't a one-trick pony. So, I have to ask, if you were a tanker in 1944, would you take the speed of the Hellcat and pray you don't get hit? Or would you wait for the armor of the Pershing? Let me know in the comments. And for more declassified history that digs deeper than the textbooks, make sure you're subscribed.